over those years, as I began to address that within relationship with these guys, deepening with my wife, some counseling, I just began to find freedom, as in porn could always be a solution. Like, I have a phone in my pocket. I could access it at any point. It's just one of the least desirable solutions out of all the solutions that I have now, because of the work that I've done.
Kris Vallotton. Welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to be fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. And I'm here with Aaron Zint. Did I say that right?
Yep.
There it is. And Aaron Zint is the head of the Whole Man Project. I want to make sure I got that right.
Yes,
the Whole Man Project at Bethel Church. And you are married.
Yes.
to one woman. We had to do this a couple times because I said he was married to three.
Yeah.
And he has 3 children.
There we go.
Got that right.
That's it.
There it is, right there. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Let's see. I moved up to Redding 16 years ago, before I could grow facial hair.
Yeah.
Did the school of ministry
and
got married, met my wife. And she actually told me that at one point in her school ministry time, you had prayed over her like, oh, I don't see a ring on that finger. Let me take care of that.
Yeah.
6 months later, enter me. So it works.
I see
totally
no tithing towards me. Let's get that
we got
fixed
that
right
going
now.
to the
Let's
church.
get
I'll
that
write that
fixed
in the
right
memo line.
now.
Yeah, this is for Kris specifically.
So you would attribute your marriage to the spiritual environment that I created.
Yes, 100, maybe 99%.
99%.
Yeah, that's it.
That's good.
Yeah, so I moved up here, did the school ministry, and then the school ministry changed my life in a number of ways. And then I joined a men's group that is now called the Whole Man Project as a participant, and again, a massive life change for me.
It's beautiful.
And after a while, I took over that group and have been doing that ever since, and that's really like my passion, the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I get up early in the morning, usually to work on that, and then go to work. And
how old are your children?
9, 6, and 3.
9,
2 girls
6,
and a boy.
3. And you've been married how long?
It'll be 13 years, yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Okay, so what is the Whole Man Project?
Yeah, the Whole Man Project is one of Bethel's men's groups that is specific to men wanting to grow in some area of their life that feels unmanageable. Or basically we tell them, hey, if you want to join, you have to have something you want to work on, something that is...
Got to have a problem.
You got to have a problem, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that in so many words. And so we have guys there, and we kind of run it. I say like a church service, more like a youth group. We have some worship, we play a game, we have a lot of fun, we have a speaker, but then we break up into small groups, which is really the crux of it. Get guys connected, start talking about their what's going on in their heart, kind of diving into past pain, things like that might be contributing to whatever kind of problem they have in their life. Most of the guys, we say, don't come in really with a problem, they come in with a solution. And the solution just a lot of times is very unhelpful and or damaging. So our job
they come in with the wrong solution.
Yeah, they come in with the wrong solution. A solution.
Not the solution.
Not the solution. And so what we want to do is uncover like, hey, what is the problem behind this that you're using this as a solution for?
So good.
So those are the things that we focus on. Pursue, and it's not necessarily like a program where you would come in for 6 months and then leave. It feels more like guys are learning to not just like change the oil in their car or change the engine out. They're relearning how to drive. A lot of guys don't know how to do life vulnerably, connected, kind of running at the things that scare them. And so that's where we're continually going after. And that's stuff that you don't graduate from, you know.
So you mean they can check out, but they can never leave?
They can check in, but they can never check. No, we have guys leave all the time. They got stuff going on. You know, it's every Monday night. But what we love is just guys that find community and then want to keep pouring into that and keep
really
growing.
Cool. And how did you get started in men's meeting? I mean, were you one of those guys that were broken or had the wrong solution?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I joined because of a porn problem,
Okay.
or what I thought was a porn problem.
Yeah.
It was really a porn solution.
It's a porn solution.
An unhelpful,
You
damaging.
solved it by porn.
I figured it out, man. And at one point I realized in my marriage, I mean, this was, it had been for me since I was 7 years old.
Oh, my
first time I
gosh.
saw porn. And so I had when I met the Lord, like I grew up in the church, but when I met the Lord and had my encounter with God, that kind of changed everything for me. I experienced sobriety from unwanted sexual behavior for a period of time. And then after a while, and there was a lot of reasons, good reasons that I could attribute to that. But after a while, the things that went unaddressed began to surface again. And so I was 3 years into marriage. I was pretty disconnected from myself, disconnected from my wife. Everything looked good on the outside. Like I'm really good at my dysfunctions, like presenting them well to the world. A
good actor.
Yeah, I'm a good actor. Yeah. And so, but this area, I was like, I can't seem to get a hold of this. I don't know what it is. And so I joined this group, and that's where I began to realize, I didn't realize I was lonely. I didn't realize I was isolated. I didn't know I was passive, and I didn't know I was in pain. And those three things, as I began to address them over I think I've been there 12-ish years, 9-ish years, something like that. Over those years, as I began to address that within relationship with these guys, deepening with my wife, some counseling, I just began to find freedom, as in porn could always be a solution. Like, I have a phone in my pocket. I could access it at any point. It's just one of the least desirable solutions out of all the solutions that I have now, because of the work that I've done. So that's the reason I joined, and part of the reason why I stay. I just like giving it away.
I don't know if you were like this, but I think a lot of, especially men, think, well, I'm going to get married, and that's going to solve my porn problem, right? Because I often don't even tell my would-be spouse that I have a problem, because I'm thinking, we get married, we're going to have sex 3 times a day, and I'm going to be good.
Totally. Because an orgasm is really what I need
to
solve all these issues.
That'll solve the problem.
A sin-free orgasm, that's the one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And how's that work out for most men?
Well, I think pretty quickly they find out it doesn't, especially after, there might be a period of time where they feel, a lot of guys will start dating a woman and then be like, wow, my porn problem is solved.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't looked at porn in 3 months. And how long have you been dating? 3 months. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, tale as old as time. And then in marriage, because they have this thing, if you ask them, they would say, no, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
Marriage won't fix that. But in the back of our minds, we go, yeah, as long as I can have sex and have it sin-free, then I will be okay. And it's when we start to realize, I'm still lonely, because I don't know how to, if I didn't know how to connect before, I don't know how to connect after.
Yeah.
It's just actually, marriage just kind of magnifies all the stuff rather than
I get to bring
up.
another person into the problem with me.
Yeah, and now I'm not just bleeding on myself, I'm kind of bleeding on them in the process.
Yeah, and that makes for a really great start to your marriage, right?
Yeah, rocky and lonely and sad and a lot of it.
So you're saying that men are choosing porn typically as a symptom, but not the problem, not the key root problem.
Correct, yeah.
What are some key root issues with men who are stuck in porn or some other addiction?
Sure,
actually?
yeah. Honestly, it's true. Like, any kind of unwanted behavior is really a symptom, and typically the solution we're going for the problems, and there could be myriad of solutions or problems out there, but the ones that I found in my life that every time I see guys address these 3, they start to gain traction.
Okay. What are those?
Isolation,
Okay.
passivity, and pain. And what I mean by pain is being aware that the past has affected me, and actually the way that I grew up formed a lens through which I see the world.
Okay.
So a lot of times guys aren't fighting with their wife, they're fighting with their mom, and they have no idea.
You mean like invisible? Like,
yes,
my mom's speaking in
invisibly.
my ear. When we say that, we're not talking about like mom's in front of me, or
Correct,
or I'm
yeah.
having a relational issue with mom, but I am in my mind.
Yes,
So
and
it's like
we
an
don't realize it.
invisible.
Yeah, it's
man.
unconscious, because my wife would tell me something like, hey, can you help me with the dishes? And I kind of revert back to this 7-year-old boy who doesn't want to do his chores, but feels like mom is making him.
Yeah.
And
I married my mother.
Yeah, that intensity rises up, and I don't realize that I'm reacting to my mom, who I am superimposing over my wife. So an example of past pain showing up, but past pain shows up in pretty dramatic ways too, especially if you have what we call capital T trauma, like sexual abuse, some sort of violence, you have a death in the family, things like that. It really stick with you until you're able to actually process that pain with people.
Aaron, when I think of sexual abuse, I don't think of men being sexually abused. That's not true, is it?
No, I was a victim of sexual abuse myself. There's quite a few. I think there was a study that one of our transformation center women who runs a sexual addiction recovery group, she said 80% of people who struggle with addiction have some form of trauma in their past. And when it comes to sexual abuse, there's a large percentage of people who have been sexually abused. And so while females would be the higher statistic of those who have been,
what I think.
It still happens quite a bit. And so there's a lot of guys in my group who wouldn't even say they've been sexually abused because of the way that we like to reframe our past, or the complicity with which they experience that abuse. Like, yeah, but I didn't say no to it, or I didn't fight them off, or whatever. So there's a lot of pain around that.
Yeah, and then there's a stigma too that if you are sexually abused as a child, sexually abused as a man, if you're raped, if you're molested, it's kind of like I think there's probably like this with women too, but more unlikely to say something about it, right?
Yeah, there's so much shame attached to it, and partly around the complicity. But even in my case, I didn't have any tension with the complicity. It definitely was something imposed on me by an adult when I was, I think, 9-ish. But I had a hard time telling anyone because I felt ashamed of what happened to me. Yeah. Which was kind of, there's no rational way to explain that except that as a kid, you see adults as they're really your example for God, who's perfect. Yeah. And when they fail you, you interpret that as there is something wrong with me. That is why I experience this, because we don't want to take an imperfect view of the people who should be taking care of us.
Yeah. So it's kind of like I blame myself.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
It happens in divorces too, right?
I
grew up obviously in a divorced home, and I felt like, there was some, like my stepfather left because my father drowned, but my first stepfather left because I did something wrong. So a passivity, you explain.
Yeah.
The next one is?
Oh, so that'd be the pain side of
pain,
it.
Yeah.
And also current day pain. Like I experience tension with my wife. There's some hurtful comment with somebody, and I don't bring it up, or I just kind of shove it down, because that's what men do. Like, we don't be too sensitive, just like ignore it, and then it'll go away, except that it doesn't. It just kind of builds up pressure over time. So, but then passivity, for me, I would define that as an avoidance because of fear. Generally, just I'm avoiding something. And so I went around my entire life with this thought, man, everybody I know likes me. I am such a likable guy. True, I think I'm a likable guy. However, I also wasn't showing up as my real self to anyone because I was terrified of disappointing somebody, of creating conflict. And so I would just placate whatever anybody else wanted. I wouldn't have an opinion. I'd have their opinion. Yeah. Because that worked really well. So my passivity showed up in I would avoid conflict like the plague. And therefore, I had no real intimacy. Because Dan Fairley likes to say that conflict is an invitation to intimacy. And so if we allow ourselves to have these difficult conversations, we actually open ourselves up to more intimacy with the other person, rather than if you have no conflict, like I don't know, you could be lacking a lot of intimacy there. Especially if it's avoidance. So that's where I'd say passivity shows up in avoidance. It shows up in your personality type as well. Like, I avoid conflict. I got a buddy who loves conflict. Like, the guy would just want to debate with people for fun. So his passivity tends to show up in he's afraid to look weak. And so that I saw that dynamic a lot with his wife when he had a hard time admitting any fault when they had an argument, or he had a lot of great explanations about why she was always wrong. And so that his passivity would show up.
But what if your wife is always wrong, like my wife?
Well, then you're probably good to go.
I'm probably
for a while.
okay, right?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to just straighten that out.
Yeah,
right now.
that's good. And she'd have nothing to say about that, probably.
No,
so.
she wouldn't. I think she understands it.
Yeah. So, passivity shows up in avoidance, but it also shows up in just, I don't want to do uncomfortable, hard things. And you can't grow unless you get uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form.
I don't know how you'd escape life. Like Jesus said it this way, in the world you'll have tribulation. Mm-hmm. So, I think life is full of challenges.
Oh, yeah. But if you don't rise up to them or you don't confront them, that's what we'd use a lot of our solutions for. Man, there's so many challenges in life. Just binge on Netflix for the next 10 hours.
Exactly.
Just use porn, just use drugs, just use alcohol, just use video games. And that we find a lot of guys in the group who are dealing with passivity, it shows up in a lot of those coping mechanisms. And it shows up at my work. I was in HR for a while, which means I had to tell people things they didn't want to hear. Terrifying for me. I couldn't breathe in a lot of these conversations. But I would try to write somebody up and tell them what they did wrong. However, I'd try to dance around it I'm sure you didn't mean this. And it's not that big of a deal. But if you could, you're kind of in trouble. Can you sign this? Yeah. And just try to avoid it as much as possible because I couldn't stand the idea of this person not being okay with me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so my counselor had given me homework. He said, I want you to go to your HR manager and tell her, I want to be a part of every difficult conversation you have. Because he said, I think you're more addicted to passivity than you are porn. And I was like, oh. Yeah, you're probably right. And so I sat in on probably 100 written warnings, terminations, things that I was deathly afraid of. But over time, I found that as I sat through these, one, you get a little used to it. But then two, you also realize at the end, I'm still okay. So you're introducing kind of disconfirming evidence that my world will end if this person sees me in a negative light.
So good.
And so I did it enough to one day I had to fire somebody all by myself and I couldn't breathe in it. But however, when I was done, I was like, I'm okay. I actually am powerful. I do have a ton of purpose and I couldn't figure those things out by avoiding things. So passivity kind of robs you of power, feeling powerful, robs you of feeling purposeful. So pain, passivity, and then isolation.
I was going to say, you can't really conquer what you don't confront, right?
Yeah. You had said in the school ministry a long time ago, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it was about if you have a fear of flying, but you never get on a plane.
Yeah.
You can say, no, I have no fear of flying. I just really love driving long distances.
Yeah, exactly.
I love taking boats across the Atlantic. Yeah. So
it's the same thing.
Oh, totally.
I'm not afraid. You're not afraid because you actually don't get on the plane.
Yeah.
And you're saying that in intimacy, I'm not afraid of intimacy. Yeah, because you actually never get intimate.
Yeah.
And you never get intimate because you actually aren't authentic.
Mm-hmm.
You actually don't show up. You actually are afraid that you're going to see in me what I think I see in me, maybe.
Yeah.
That's the final one was what?
Isolation. And this is probably, sometimes when I get a chance to talk to people and talk about these subjects, if I have a limited amount of time, I start with isolation and I stay there. And really the antidote, connection. And so because dealing with passivity, dealing with pain, you don't want to do that stuff alone. And just especially with the guys in our group who are working through unmanageable behavior, for most of their life, they tried to do it alone. And even with me and God are working on this. But even in the garden after Adam named all the animals and he's super close to God, God goes, I still call this alone. We're really tight, but this is alone. So
exactly.
He actually made us to need other people, and something that he wants to give us only through other people, I believe. And so, really being able to connect. And it's, there's some people who are very isolated who have tons of friends. They're around a whole bunch of people. They're like, no, I see people every single day. But the difference for me was realizing that in all the groups I was in all the relationships I had, I wasn't really known by them.
Yeah.
So because I kept all the vulnerable parts of me, like I was honest, but the vulnerability aspect is I'm going to hand you something that you could hurt me with.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of risk there because we have been hurt. And so we, on an unconscious level, go, oh, don't do that again, because that hurts real bad. Like if I share my emotions with somebody on the playground, if I start to cry, they laugh. So, okay, tears result in rejection. Don't do that. If I share my feelings with my parents and your parents happen to be insecure about the very thing you're talking about, I get shut down. Like, hey, there's nothing to cry about, or I'll give you something to cry about.
I'll give you something to cry about.
The classic line. You're like, oh, okay, so it's
That's
not.
really painful, though. I have to tell you, because I use that line a lot. Especially with Jay. You can tell he's still a little bit tweaked from it, you know?
Yeah, so you like
You want to cry?
Yeah.
I'll give you something to cry about.
So you go, okay, what I have to cry about is invalid.
Yeah.
And so and then you grow up in life going like, oh, the things that I feel aren't really, especially compared to, there's so many people worse off than me. Like I had that so much, like I have no reason to be quote unquote in pain, because I had Christian parents. They didn't abuse me. I grew up in a church. Man, we were middle class. Like, what else could you ask for?
I'm good broken.
Yeah.
I have no reason to be broken. I'm just broken.
Yeah. And so it feels very invalidating. Like, why don't you, because you have no good reason to feel this, you just shove it all down, and then no vulnerability shows up, and then no connection. Ken Williams, in The Journey Out, he says, you can't know unconditional love until somebody knows the condition you're in. And it requires, in order to actually fully receive love and acceptance from somebody, you have to actually open up the stuff that you are hiding from sight.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not, right?
And I felt the opposite way for a long, long time. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the problem, and you wrote a book about this whole journey, right?
This whole thing, yeah.
It took you 3 years. You just told me before you started the interview.
Yeah.
And what's the name of that book?
Numb to Known.
Numb to Known.
Yeah.
And what are some solutions that you talk about in that book?
Yeah.
Because I suppose the book's not just about, here's the problem.
Yeah. You have to buy the second book for this.
You got a part
much
2
more
is
expensive.
exactly. Yeah. Here's how screwed up you are.
Yeah.
The end.
Hope you walk away encouraged.
Yeah. Hope you're encouraged.
Yeah. No, so that I do spell that out. So like I have sections in the book, and the first section, part 1, is called "Porn is Not the Problem." So I want to create that understanding, and then the next sections are: I didn't know I was lonely, I didn't know I was passive, and I didn't know I was in pain. And recognizing the problem, but then also going, okay, so what do we do about isolation? Yeah. So first, I would, especially around unmanageable behavior, get in a group. Doesn't matter, like, you don't have to join our group. You don't have to, any group of people where you can actually begin to share the things that you swore you would never tell anybody.
So transparency. Get into some kind of dynamic where you have to practice transparency.
Yes, it's a ton of practice.
Yeah.
And you have to share things. The vulnerability aspect of this all is you have to share things that you're pretty sure people are going to go, wow, really? That? Yeah. You did that? I've never heard of anyone doing that.
Yeah, that's what you're afraid is going to happen,
that's
right?
exactly the scenario that runs in your head.
You have that problem?
Yeah.
Johnny, have you ever had that problem? We've never had that problem.
Come check this out, what this guy's dealing with.
Exactly. Yeah, write this down.
Yeah.
Let's video this.
Yeah. I had this experience at 16 years old. There was an adult in my life who I really looked up to. I was feeling a lot of shame. There's a few of us guys around, and he goes, okay, if you're dealing with shame, you just got to share something like, what's the worst thing you've ever done? So he tells me that, and instantly I have a Rolodex of despicable things back here, especially when you're dealing with like sexual behavior for a long time. But I obviously have those ones way, way back there, so they're not really accessible. So I go, well, I'll pick a few of these things. And he says something to the effect of, well, it's not like you thought about your mom sexually or anything like that. And all the guys laughed, and I was like, yep, definitely not that. Yeah. And decided, that's one of those things way back there that now I need to bury in the ground. So that no one can ever find. Yeah. And so
actually that was on the Rolodex.
Right? So then I learned that, you can't actually share this stuff because that's what results. So eventually when I shared in front of my small group one time, like our goal was nothing good grows in the dark. So let's find all the things in the dark and put it into the light so it can't grow anymore. And so that we take away the power from shame. And so I shared my experience around sexualizing my mom. And, some of the guys, they gave me a really good, I'm here, I'm with you, and that doesn't freak me out. And some of the guys didn't quite have that face. However, what I realized later was I had a buddy run into my office. He's a good friend of mine I work with, and he was joking. When you ask somebody a question that you don't really care about the answer, but you want them to ask you back. Yeah. So he runs in my office. He goes, "Quick, tell me the worst thing you've ever done." And I was like, "Sexualize my mom." And he goes, "Oh, wow, yours was way worse than mine." But I realized in that moment I had zero shame, and that was the first thing that came out. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that." I mean, I've since thought of things that I thought were worse, and then I had to share them with people because the shame that I felt, the massive amount of shame that I felt there, was keeping me so isolated. You start to make it a practice of getting out the things that you swore you would never tell anybody. You have to make a practice of sharing your emotions. Surprise, we have them. Surprise, men have them, and it's not just angry. There's actually usually a lot of scared, a lot of sad, a lot of hurt, a lot of lonely. So vocalizing those emotions on a regular basis,
so good.
that will create in you a feeling. Really what you're going for is not that people hear stuff, but that people look at you and go, "Oh," and then you feel they get it.
Yeah.
That's the moment you want, where I feel known for the first time in my life because I told them something that nobody else knows, but then also they didn't reject me.
Yeah.
Like I felt cared for, I felt listened to, I felt attuned to. So that is one of the very practical steps: is get in a group, share the things that have shame attached to it, and then share your emotions on a regular. You have to get it connected to your emotions. Like I talk about that at length in there because there's so much that's just shut down. That's the numb part. And I didn't know I had any of these emotions going on. So practicing that. So that would be for the isolation. The passivity is, one, recognizing where it is. I rationalized my passivity for a long time. I also, once I found out I was passive, would start berating myself for my passivity, which also, if it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance, I would think I need a little bit of that for myself as well. So actually showing kindness to myself and going, "Hey, what is my passivity trying to protect in me?" Because if I'm afraid of something, what am I afraid? Oh, my passivity actually protected me from being rejected. Now, it was a bunker, like an apocalyptic, a bunker that I locked myself in. Yeah, I was kept from death, of rejection, but I was also kept from intimacy and life. Yeah. And so I had to recognize that it was there, and then I had to ask myself, what's this protecting, so that I could heal those things. Like, where did all this fear of rejection come from? Good. I appreciate passivity, what you were trying to do. Let's give you a different role. Like you can maybe talk to me and use discernment of like, maybe that person's not safe, but you're not going to make my decisions anymore. And then actually doing the hard things. So in order to believe something about yourself that you didn't believe before, you can declare it, you can have an experience with God, but sometimes you just need disconfirming evidence. You need something that tells you, "Oh, see, you have what it takes." I can tell myself I have what it takes all day long, but sometimes when I just do the very hard thing and I'm okay afterwards, I go, "Oh, I actually do have what it takes to do this. Wow.
So good.
I am that kind of person." So doing the hard things, and then the last, solution to the real problem of pain, similar to the isolation part, is what you have to. We're not going to go digging around for pain, like where's pain, where's pain, where's pain, especially when it comes to our past.
Yeah.
But when you step on a shard of glass on the beach, you don't just keep walking. You go dig it up and go, oh, there's actually a couple pieces around here. Let me go throw that away so my kids don't step on this same thing, so that my wife doesn't step on the same thing that happened to me. And you have to recognize that. I used to think, when I was molested, yes, but I don't feel anything about that. I don't think it affected me at all. I just had this like grand illusion that what happened in my head is what was true of my heart and my soul, and not necessarily the case. So I had to actually be willing to step back into some of those memories with trusted people who were safe, share it, walk through the pain of that, actually feel the comfort that them just going, wow, that's really hard. I'm so sorry you went through that.
So good.
Like a lot of our trauma is not just the experience that happened to us, but the experience of being alone in the midst of pain. And so just not being alone anymore is so healing. And then you just have to build an emotional vocabulary with which you can go, oh, what's happening right now? Oh, I feel scared that this is going to happen. Fear on little levels, like I'm afraid I'm not going to hit that deadline. That's important.
I just say, oh, crap all the time.
Yeah,
that's my vocabulary.
There's your little check engine,
crap.
like, oh, crap.
Oh,
there's something happening.
crap.
Yeah.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
How can they get in touch with you? How can they get in touch with your book?
Sure, yeah.
How do they join the men's? If they're here,
if they're local and Reading,
how do they join that? Let's start there.
Let's start there. Monday nights at 7 p.m. at the Twin View campus.
Okay.
You just show up. We'll go through the whole thing, and then before we break up into small groups, we'll have a guy that goes, hey, if you want to figure out how to get in a small group, I'll tell you all the stuff.
Got it. So
that's the first one. Mondays at 7.
You don't have to be afraid if you get there. What's going to happen to me?
No, totally. Yeah, we're not going to make you stand up.
It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, it actually is a blast. And then to get a hold of me, zintsquad.com, ZINT squad.com. So my wife and I have a marriage podcast that we have connected on there.
What's it called?
Marriage Lab.
Marriage Lab.
Marriage Lab. You can find that on any streaming platform, Apple, Spotify.
And your book.
My book is on there. Yes, available for pre-order. It's going to be released October 30th. So depending on when this releases, you can find it there. It'll be on Amazon by October 30th. There'll be ebook version, printed version.
Remind us what the name of that book is again.
Numb to Known.
Numb to Known.
Yeah, by Aaron Zint.
There it is.
Yeah.
Z-I-N-T.
Yeah,
there it is, right there.
Yeah.
Aaron, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So appreciate your insights. And there's just a ton of men who are going to get help from what you shared today.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And let's get your book too.
Yeah, let's get it.
God bless you. Join us next week. Thank you for being a part of this podcast.